four friends entered an underwater cave in the desert for an adventure. However, when they returned to the surface, they discovered that one person was missing. They immediately dove back into the cave to search, but to their shock, when they came back up again, another one was gone. Today, let us look at a truly baffling story, the incident of the Devil's Hole in the United States. To the west side of the well-known Area 51 in the United States lies the Death Valley National Park, which covers an area of about 1,400 square miles. On the eastern edge of the park, there is a desert called the Amargosa Desert. Hidden within an oasis of this desert is the place where our story takes place, known as the Devil's Hole. It is located in the state of Nevada, about 55 miles in a straight line from Las Vegas, and driving there takes only about 1.5 hours. From the map, it can be seen that the entrance to the Devil's Hole has already been surrounded by fences, but inside there is a viewing platform left open for visitors. From this platform, one can see the entrance to the Devil's Hole. The entrance lies more than 6 feet below the ground, and from the outside, it appears to be nothing more than a long and narrow pool, about 72 feet in length and 11 feet in width. There are also some measuring devices placed in the water. The reason it is fenced off is not for charging fees, but to protect an endangered species that lives inside, called the Devil's Hole pupfish. This fish is only about 1 inch long, metallic blue in color, with rainbow-like eyes. The Devil's Hole pupfish is considered one of the rarest fish species on Earth. As of April of the year 2022, the number of pupfish in the Devil's Hole was only 175. Because this fish is so extremely rare, in the year 1952, President Harry Truman included the Devil's Hole within Death Valley National Park and set up fences at that time to protect them. However, the true reason people are fascinated by this place is not the tiny fish, but the enormous cave hidden beneath the pool. In May of 1964, a diver named Jim Houts and his team were granted permission to explore the cave. After dozens of dives, they gradually mapped out the structure of the cave. From the entrance down to about 30 feet is the main habitat of the Devil's Hole pupfish. Going deeper, there is a wide passage known as the main chamber. On the left side of the main chamber are many side passages and independent spaces. The bottom of this area, around 100 to 160 feet underwater, forms a funnel shape. At the same time, this area serves as a crossroads. To the right, there is an upward sloping passage. Following it upward leads to an air pocket known as Brown's Room. The water level in Brown's Room is the same as that at the cave entrance, which suggests that the space is not sealed but connected to the outside through many tiny channels. Otherwise, the water level would not match. On the right side of Brown's Room, there is a vertical passage leading straight down. This passage branches off again and connects with other parts of the cave, all leading to a massive space called the Ackley Cavern. This cavern is about 500 feet long, 100 feet wide, and 160 feet high. Its three-dimensional shape resembles an old-fashioned hot water bottle filled with water. The bottom of the cavern narrows into an hourglass-like structure that may connect to an underground river. Jim called this passage the Eye of Water, and the area below it was named the Infinite Space. However, because of the limitations of diving technology at that time, Jim only reached a depth of about 300 feet. The shape of the Ackley Cavern could only be roughly estimated, and what lies deeper inside the cave remains unknown. When the discovery was reported by the media, it immediately caused a sensation. Together with Jim's vivid description of the beauty inside the cave, many diving enthusiasts became fascinated by the place. Among them was a 19-year-old young man named Paul Contieri. He worked as a waiter at a restaurant near the Nevada test site. Paul was not a professional diver. His diving experience was only at the beginner level, and his experience in cave diving was even more scarce. However, after reading Jim's account of the stunning scenery in the Devil's Hole, he could not resist the temptation. He decided to invite 3 friends to join him on an adventure. These 3 were David and the Alter brothers. Among them, David had only recently become Paul's brother-in-law a few months earlier. Just like Paul, the others also had almost no experience in cave diving. But young people often fear nothing, and the four of them quickly agreed to take on the challenge together. On the night of June 19, 1965, the four young men drove off with their equipment and their courage. Why did they choose to go at night? As mentioned earlier, to protect the endangered species, the Devil's Hole had already been surrounded by fences at that time. Therefore, the four of them decided to sneak in during the night, when almost no one would notice them. After arriving near the Devil's Hole, they parked the car, found a gap in the fence, and slipped through. But just before entering the water, the older of the Alter brothers hesitated and backed out. To make the distinction clear, from here on we will call the elder brother Big Alter and the younger brother Little Alter. In the end, Big Alter stayed at the entrance to keep watch, while the other three dived into the water. At the habitat of the pupfish, they placed a set of decompression bottles and then continued their descent. Soon they reached the entrance of the Ackley Cavern. Looking at the vast, dark space below and the various rock formations around them, they became extremely excited. The three moved slowly while admiring the scenery inside the cave. Without realizing it, they had descended to a depth of about 300 feet. Even today, this depth is still considered very difficult for most cave diving, and these three were using only amateur diving equipment. After a while, Little Alter realized that his air supply was running low, so he signaled to the other two that it was time to ascend. They began to follow the rope upward, but when they reached the decompression point, Little Alter and David noticed that Paul was no longer behind them. They waited for a moment, but Paul still did not appear. Without even finishing their decompression procedure, they rushed to the surface. After changing to new air tanks, they immediately dove back down to search. However, during their descent, they never encountered Paul. Once again, the two of them entered the Ackley Cavern. The space below was still pitch black, with no sign of any light. David started searching toward the left side of the cavern, but surrounded by darkness, Little Alter suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of fear. On top of that, he suspected his air supply might not be enough for another round of decompression. Without informing David, he decided to swim back alone along the rope. When he returned to the decompression point, he slowly calmed down. But then he realized that David was not following behind him. Even after completing the decompression process, David still had not appeared. When Little Alter finally surfaced, he told his elder brother what had happened. Neither of the brothers dared to go back down again, so they immediately drove back to Las Vegas to call for help. When the police received the report, they had no way to handle the situation on their own, so they turned to Jim Houts, who had previously explored the Devil's Hole. In the early hours of June 20th, Jim and his companions arrived at the site. They decided to divide into 3 teams for the search. Jim and another diver formed the first team to go down, following the same route that Paul and his friends had taken. Aside from finding a flashlight at a depth of about 100 feet, they discovered nothing. Afterward, the second team entered the water to take over. Their task was to search the area on the left side, between 65 and 160 feet below the surface. According to Little Alter, when he came up the second time, David had been swimming in that direction. The second team of divers did make a discovery there, a diving mask and a snorkel, which likely belonged to David. But even after they searched all the passages and separate chambers, they still found no trace of him. When they returned to the surface, the group began to analyze the situation. Could it be that Paul and David, while trying to come back, had mistakenly entered the passage leading to Brown's room? If so, then once they reached the air pocket, they might still be alive. With this possibility in mind, the third team of divers prepared to check Brown's room. This dive turned out to be the most troublesome and most dangerous part of the entire search. The divers first had to descend to the funnel-shaped area, and then enter the passage leading toward Brown's room. Because the passage sloped upward, before reaching Brown's room, they were required to carry out a round of decompression. After searching the air pocket in Brown's room, they then had to descend vertically through another passage on the opposite side and follow a connecting tunnel back to the funnel. From there, they could begin their ascent and perform a second decompression stop. Even with all of these efforts, the search brought no results. At that point, the rescuers wondered if the two missing men might have fallen deeper into the cave. Jim and his partner from the first team decided to dive once more. They searched the area at around 330 feet underwater, but still found nothing. Since no one knew how far down the cave extended, Jim and his companion tied a heavy weight to a rope and lowered it down the passage called the Eye of Water. The rope measured 930 feet in length, but even after the entire line was let out, it did not touch the bottom. This meant that the Devil's Hole was at least 1,250 feet deep. If the two young men had truly sunk all the way to the bottom, there was no way to recover them with the diving technology available at that time. With no other option, Jim and his partner abandoned the search and returned to the surface. Outside the cave, the waiting families broke down in tears when they heard the news. The scene captured by the media that day showed, on the left, Big Alter comforting David's mother, Rose. On the right were Rose again together with David's wife, Paula. In a single day, Paula had lost both her husband and her younger brother. Years later, in 1991, 3 divers from the United States Geological Survey descended to a depth of about 435 feet. However, they realized that the passage they had entered was not the Eye of Water and not the infinite space either, but a new, narrow passage leading downward, where the bottom was still nowhere in sight. This suggested that the structure of the Devil's Hole might be even more complex than previously known. For the sake of protecting the endangered pupfish, the authorities did not grant permission for further exploration. Compared with measuring its depth, protecting the Devil's Hole pupfish was considered far more important. In recent years, however, scientists have successfully bred this rare species outside the cave. With their numbers gradually increasing, it is believed that one day, scientific exploration of the Devil's Hole will once again begin. And that concludes today's story.